This is not a podcast about being broken, although you may have been. This is a podcast about strength for women who find themselves in difficult relationships, including that sometimes difficult one with yourself. We'll look at your relationship through a lens of psychology, faith, and a little dash of my own kind of feminism. We're not fixing them, we're fixing you, and that changes everything. Welcome to Stronger in the Difficult Places. Save yourself, heal your relationships. Listen in. There are 5 reasons that people want to get married, and those are the same 5 reasons why people ultimately choose divorce. How powerful is that statement? Today, I'm excited to talk about the 5 cravings of your soul that affect your relationship with my guest, Corey Rosenke. Corey is author of the book, The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul. He is a pastor and he is a tenacious truth teller. And although his book is not specifically about relationships or difficult relationships, it does talk about relationships because the book is about the 5 cravings of the soul. And those 5 cravings affect our relationship with ourselves. And you guys know that here I am all about building a healthy relationship with yourself, but the book is also about your relationship with others and God. Recognizing that you have 5 cravings of your soul that affect all of that. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with Corey. But first up, my win and my fail. My win is that I took my own advice, and last week I had 3 very hard conversations with 3 different people. And just like I said last week, the more you have hard conversations, the easier it is to have hard conversations. And hard conversations free you up with yourself. They free you up in relationship with other people. So I had some hard conversations, and I'm so thankful that I did. Now my fail. I hope somebody writes me and says, me too, because I have a very difficult relationship with Apple iPods, AirPods, whatever they're called. We are struggling. I'm a busy woman. I'm always listening to something, talking to somebody on the phone. I've got those AirPods in my ear all the time. I don't want to hear you tell me about how unhealthy it is. It's the way that I get my stuff done. But I also have a problem because they are now becoming disposable AirPods, and those things are not cheap, y'all. I struggle to be able to keep these things. I lose them. I lose one. I have about 3 pairs of half an AirPod, and it's frustrating. So my fail is that despite me putting in some extra precautions, I literally wrap a hair tie around my AirPod case. I still lost one of my AirPods. So that's my fail. I'm trying to figure it out. But let's get on to a more important conversation. Let's talk about the 5 cravings of your soul. Listen in. Corey, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. As we talked behind the scenes, you are maybe 6 of the men that I've had on. Although I feel like the past year I've had more men on than in years past. So I love having men on, just hearing your perspective. And I know you have so much wisdom. So thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. Hopefully, because there's more in the last year, that's a sign that men are becoming more engaged. We can always hope.
Yes, I love that. I love that. I will definitely take that reframe for sure. So can you share with my audience a little bit about how you came to be who you are today? That's just a little,
Oh man.
small
Yeah,
question.
that's just a little story. Well, I'll give you the short version.
Yes.
I was raised in poverty. And what I mean by poverty, I mean like picking berries in the forest to eat kind of poverty.
Wow.
My family was homeless for a while. We lived in a tent by a lake. Um, and grew up throughout, a life experience of, like I said, of marginalization, of kind of being removed, of being
Yes.
remote,
Right.
never feeling like I was part of it. I couldn't be in sports because my family couldn't afford to pay the sports fee in school, that kind of thing. And but I grew up from a very young age asking the question, why? I wanted to know why. I think it's a question that all of us ask. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's probably one of the chief questions within us. But
Right.
I mean, from a very young age, I wanted to know why our life was different. Why did some people have electricity and others didn't?
Mm.
Why did some people get to go to Disneyland on vacation and others didn't?
Right.
And I really wanted to know why. And so from a very young age, like I would say 10 and 11, I remember I got introduced to Plato and Aristotle when I was 10 and 11. I remember just even at that very young age, just pouring myself into philosophy. I just got a hunger for philosophy. Like I said, Plato, Aristotle, Confucius, was really big into Marcus Aurelius. To me, a very underrated philosopher. Didn't find the answers I was looking for there, and that kind of led me into
Mm.
psychology, right? And
Mhm.
and even as a young person, I remember reading Freud and his whole idea about the development of personality with the id and the ego and the
Mhm.
superego, and spent a lot of time really just kind of trying to understand the human mind. Didn't quite find my answers, which led me into neuroscience. I totally geeked out on neuroscience for a
Yeah.
while, right? Just the whole idea of the neuroplasticity of the brain and how it can change and develop. And if we think in a specific direction, how literal neural grooves are aligned, and so it
Right.
is difficult, but very possible to totally change your life with self-discipline and accountability, and the whole concept and the impact of whether we're talking about dopamine, right, or serotonin, and just amazing information about the brain. But I soon came to realize that when I was studying philosophy or psychology, or in fact neuroscience, what I was studying was mechanism.
Right.
I was studying response, not source,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I often say that it was a study of philosophy and then psychology and then neuroscience that really led me to the soul. And that has really been the passion on my heart, most recently has been trying to communicate to people, reawaken us to something we know deep inside, but we definitely don't live like we know it. And
Right.
that is this, that more than a brain or a body, you are a soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to speak to the soul inside of people, right? And so whether people are talking about their desire to climb the corporate ladder, or whether it's people trying to find healing from past trauma,
Right.
absolutely, we must address the biological. We're foolish if we don't address the biological, right? But we can't only address the biological, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that has been kind of my passion, has been to talk to people and help them once again become aware that more than a brain or a body, they are a soul. And if they truly want to find peace and happiness, they have to look beyond biology.
I love that. That resonates with me so much, especially because, as you know, I, as a therapist, also study psychology. I studied philosophy in college, although I have to tell you, it never resonated with me. The questions are just a little too obscure. I don't know. It just never quite resonated with
I
me.
I agree. That's why it didn't
Yes.
satisfy. It's so
Right.
open-ended.
Yes, yes. But psychology, the reason why it's a science is because it is a study, right? That we will
Mhm.
never have all the answers. We will always be studying, but we will never have all the answers. So I'm definitely sold on the reality of a soul. I believe, of course, in God, and I believe that God places a soul in humans. But for those who may not be in that place, what proof do we have as humans that there's a soul, that a
Right.
soul exists?
I appreciate you asking that. Well, first off, when I get asked that question, I start off by saying you are your own best evidence that you have a
Mm,
soul.
wow.
Now, I believe that it's something that we intuitively know, right?
Hmm.
It's something that perhaps in modern decades has been silenced, but it's a voice that is always there. And
Right.
it's evidenced in the things that we crave. C.S. Lewis once said that creatures do not have cravings unless satisfaction for those cravings exists, right?
Wow.
And
Hmm.
like he would say, like a baby feels hunger. Well, there's such a thing as food. If
Yeah.
there was no such thing as food, none of us would ever feel hunger, right?
Correct.
And of course,
Correct.
you can take that down. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there's such a thing as water. If there was
Hmm.
no such thing as water, there would be no such thing as a desire to swim.
Right.
But we as humans don't simply have biological cravings. We have what I have come to term as non-biological cravings. We
Hmm.
crave things that outside of biological reasoning. We crave justice.
Right.
We crave the distinction, to understand the distinction between a moral right and a moral wrong, right?
Right. Hmm.
We crave identity, right? In my book, I have
Absolutely.
a whole chapter on identity, and identity really asks those four symbiotic questions: Who am I? Why am I? Do I have purpose? Do I have value? That's not a
Mm-hmm.
biological craving. There is something deeper at work. Not to mention our craving to not we don't just have a desire not to die. We have a desire to live forever.
Right.
That is a non-biological craving. And so I often say if we explore ourselves, we we will find that desire, that awareness of the soul. And I would also say this, we have the evidence of global what I often call is uncoerced conclusion. And that is to say that virtually every culture in the history of the world,
Yes. Right.
without exception, whether they build their houses out of buffalo hide or stone or sod or snow, blocks of snow, right? Whether they were coastal kind of fishermen or whether they were hunter gatherers or farmers, they
Mm-hmm.
all came to the same conclusion that we exist beyond biology. And I would say that is actually the birthplace of religion. The reason why there's so many religions around the world today is all these cultures coming to the point where they are aware of their non-biological selves. They're aware of the soul. And so they have to try to develop a framework with which to explain it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hence the birth of religion,
Right.
where we can definitely say religion traveled around the world by people, right? We can say that Europeans brought Christianity right to America.
Native
Um,
Americans. Uh-huh.
yeah, exactly. We could say that, we could say obviously with Islam and the movement and the growth of Islam around the world, those are people taking that religion to those different places. But when it comes to the soul, it was not evangelized. Every culture unanimously, without coercion, came to the same conclusion, right? That is as scientific a statement or a test as you can ever get, right? I often say if I'm sitting in my living room and my son comes running in from his bedroom and he says, "Dad, did you hear that loud bang?" I'm like, "No, I didn't. I didn't hear it, son." And I'm wondering, maybe did he hear it or didn't he hear it? Then my wife comes in from the garden and she says, "Did you hear that loud bang?" I'm like, "Oh, two testimonies in
Right.
different places." And then my neighbor knocks on the door and he says, "Hey, did you guys hear that big bang?" I'm like, "Okay, I didn't hear it at this particular moment, but I
Yes.
know there was a bang." Multiply that thousands of times with all these cultures, all of them coming to the same conclusion independently. That's as scientific a statement as you can get.
Wow. I've
Yes,
never
we
heard
have
it put
souls.
that way. But yeah, we do have souls. You're right. And I've never heard it put that way, but I think that's perfectly, like you said, multiply that by billions of people times the beginning of time.
Right.
And I think that that's probably something you can't deny.
Right.
You
Well, and
know,
even what you mentioned, like when let's say we talk about Europeans, so they believed in the soul, they come to Plymouth Rock. They obviously influence a religion to the Native Americans, but the Native Americans already had an awareness of the soul,
absolutely. They
right?
did.
And that
Yeah.
is true globally. It was
Yeah.
not influenced by outside people. It was they all came to that same conclusion together at the same time.
I love that. I love that. Well, my podcast is all about helping women have better relationships with themselves, which we know then
Mhm,
ripple out to healthier
mhm,
relationships with them, everybody in their world. And so I think going down to just the basic reality of your soul and how to
mhm.
honor that as a woman, how to honor that as a person, how to care for your soul seems to be just the very beginning of caring for yourself as a human, right?
I think you're
Yeah.
so right. And I think that it's something that for me, when we talk about the soul, I come from a faith background, from the Christian faith
Mhm.
background, and I can say that even in Christianity, um, we talk about the soul all the time, but
Right,
it's always ambiguous. It's
right.
it's always kind of like it's almost like a Star Wars type thing, the Force. There's kind of this, which is really unhelpful, right? And it
Yes.
really it really allows people to kind of do whatever they want with it, whether it's true or not. But my purpose has been to try to help people define the soul and understand the soul. And so the book that I wrote is called The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the Five Cravings of Your Soul. And really what I've done is I've boiled it down to what I can identify as five cravings of the soul, which I propose, and this is a big statement,
That's right.
are the five cravings that have propelled all humanity through life and time.
Let's hear
Every
them.
every decision we've made, whether again, it has nothing to do with ethnicity or what part of the world you were in. It comes down to these five cravings, and they are security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. I believe that everything,
What
all
was
of
the
our
last one?
innocence,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm
And
curious. I want to hear
I'm
both.
actually glad I can tell the psychologist in you, because
Yeah.
if you look at security, identity, independence, and significance, you will
Mhm.
find for hundreds of years psychologists have been parodying the
Absolutely.
same thing, these cravings.
Right.
The difference that what I've done is I believe that they are deeper than psychology. They're a non-biological craving. We can't
Mm,
try, they make no sense if we're viewing them through the lens of biological function. There's a
hmm
deeper source. And the fifth one is something I believe, I don't believe that it's more important than anyone else, but I believe it's second to none, is innocence. And I think that when we explore the human craving for innocence, we truly understand kind of the missing link. I mean, what is the root cause of basically every argument we've ever had? Either boldly or subtly accused me of wrongdoing.
right.
And
Yes.
and what is our response? Our response is to either push back, to fight, or to flee, right? All
Okay.
of our human relationships, whether it's with our siblings or with our parents or with our spouses or boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, there is this there is this craving in me to realize that I am not only not guilty, but that I am good, right? I'm not
Mm,
it's not just that I'm not
we're
a bad
not
boy.
wrong.
I
Yes.
need to know that I am a good boy, right?
Yes.
And this craving for innocence within each one of us is so powerful and so profound. We can look, to me, it is at the root of cancel culture.
hmm
It's
hmm
at the root of a divorce epidemic. It's
hmm
at the root of so many issues in our lives. Now, not because the craving is impure. The craving is a good craving,
hmm
but it's when we approach it in an unhealthy way
Right.
that it becomes such a bane in our society.
Wow. 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 That is huge. I've never thought of it about it that way. Um, being innocent from wrong. And you're right. That is the crux of, I mean, I've been doing therapy for over 20 years,
Yeah,
and that is always where we are is who's couples come in and who's wrong, who's right.
right.
Of
Well,
course, we have to get to a place where that's not the point, but
right.
that is always the drive is to prove yourself to essentially not be wrong. And so when I hear that, and of course through my lens, because I've been doing a deep study on shame this year,
Mhm.
um, is I think of shame because shame is that concept of I am bad or I am
Right.
wrong, right?
Right.
And it's our desire to obliterate shame in
Yeah.
ourselves as well.
Yeah. Well, and I often in my book I break it down to what I call Mr. Despair and Little Miss Indignant. And I talk about how these two terrible forces in our lives. Mr. Despair is exactly what he brings, that shame. He
Right.
wants you to think you aren't worthy, you
hmm
aren't good, no
hmm
one could possibly love you. That's Mr.
hmm
Despair just kind of stomping down, or Mr. Shame for that matter, right?
hmm
Stomping on you. And then there's Little Miss Indignant, who is, I'm never wrong.
Right.
It's you that's wrong. I'm right, right?
Right.
And it's this whole combative type scenario that we see. So yeah, Mr. Despair, Little Miss Indignant, which, like I said, Mr. Despair is definitely heavily focused on the shame that you mentioned there.
Oddly enough, I have a slightly different name, I guess, and I call that the Phantom Critic. But
Mhm.
then I also call a little bit different than Little Miss Indignant because I call the other aspect of ourself the courageous truth teller. And that's someone who's not
Mhm.
necessarily indignant, but is going to tell you the truth
Right.
regardless, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love
Right.
that though. So I certainly understand those first four when you talk about the cravings of the soul, but can you share for my audience? Can we talk about what those four are?
Sure. Absolutely. So when I talk about security, first one
hmm
is security. I'm talking about twofold security: physical security, which of course we would talk about is our will to live, our survival instinct,
hmm
and our relational security, our need to know that our hearts are safe in the hands of those who hold them.
Right.
Right? Those are two securities that we must have. And so, yeah, security is both physical security
hmm
and relational security. And I can have all the physical security in the world. I can have a secure bank account and high walls and a moat around my house and bodyguards, right? But if I don't feel like my heart is safe in the hands of those who I have given it,
Yes.
I can't be at peace, right? And
That's
then
where it
of
goes
course
back to the
identity, as I mentioned.
non-biological part.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's no biological explanation here. There's something deeper at work,
hmm
right?
hmm
And then, of course, identity is that, as I said, that it's those four symbiotic questions: Who am I? Why am I? What is my purpose? Do I have value? All
Mm-hmm.
of us are going through life asking this questions. And again, we can have all the highest walls. We can feel like the people we are with love us.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't know who I am and whether or not I actually have value, I can't be at peace. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
and then there's independence, right? Which
Right.
which I break into two sections again: freedom and individuality.
Mm.
Right. That's
Right.
those two together I call independence. I need to have some sort of autonomy to be free. We look at our whole, one of the things we celebrate in our nation is that I have the autonomy in many cases to do the things that I want to do. And throughout human history, we see this desire that if you don't give someone at least some semblance of freedom, they will always revolt. Now,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just some tiny little thing, right? Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the freedom to leave the house, but they have the freedom to choose macaroni or salad, right? They have to have something I
Yes.
can cling to that says I have autonomy. And then the same thing with individuality. I need you to know that I am me and not you. Even though
Mm.
I want to be your friend, I want you to know that I'm distinct, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't on some level believe that we are individuals, we will feel redundant, unseen, again, without value and without purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another big one. And then of course there's significance. I
Mm-hmm.
need to know that I'm special. Not
Mm-hmm.
not just that I'm unique, right? That I'm an individual, but that I am special. And
Yes.
again, there are certain people who they have to feel they got to win the Olympics or they don't feel special. I mean, you think of that. I've seen this with Olympic athletes who, like, when they kind of pass their prime and they can't do it anymore, they don't feel there's anything about them that
They
is
lose a sense of
significant, and it's
self.
absolute.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, for some people, it might just be I make the best apple pie.
Yeah.
But for the next person, it's I didn't win gold. I only won silver.
Right.
Right. And to them, it's just major crisis because they've created this framework in their life that the significance is defined this way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Mm-hmm.
some people, it's their education. They need to have all the credentialing. They feel like they will rank people in society according to their
Correct.
significance by their education. For other people, they do it, they might do it through athletics, right? And for another person, it might be, unfortunately, we see these divisions in the country where it becomes through ethnicity and
Mm-hmm.
political party and all these different separations that come. And then, of course, like I said, there's innocence, the need to know that
Mm-hmm.
not only am I not guilty, but that I am a good boy, right? And if you violate those cravings, I often say these 5 cravings are the reason we want to get married. Many people want to get married, or it's
Yes.
what they're looking for in a
Right.
relationship, and it's also the 5 reasons why they leave
Yes.
because they came in and either they didn't
Right.
find security, they didn't
Right.
find identity, they didn't find independence, they didn't find significance, and they didn't find innocence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I often say for people who are really trying to seek whether it's build a relationship or heal a relationship or grow a relationship, look at the 5 cravings of the soul, right? And you can really identify yourself. So as an example, for me, well, all 5 cravings are true for all of us. My
Right.
biggest triggers are significance and innocence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me, I will honestly confess that oftentimes I mishandle the innocence craving, and if I feel like you're accusing me in some way, I'm very quick to react, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um and that is where faith, or the story we tell ourselves, becomes so important. See, I preface the reason I call my book The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul, is I believe that our maker put these cravings inside of us for the good and beautiful purpose of drawing us back to himself,
Right.
right?
Right.
because
Mm-hmm.
because ultimately it's only in connection with our maker that they can fully be satisfied,
Mm.
though we can pursue and should pursue the reflection of them in the people around us, and we should hopefully be reflections in our culture, where because I am with someone, or in their circle, I am emanating security and identity and independence and significance to them, as opposed to stomping on them, right? I'm a
Right.
purveyor of them as opposed to a destroyer or a stealer of them.
Right.
But ultimately, their ultimate satisfaction can only be realized in our Creator.
I love that. It's just so beautiful. And I love how you have laid it out. And so, as I'm thinking of the woman listening to this and maybe developing some awareness and recognizing all of these cravings and desires, I'm just feeling like maybe she's wondering, okay, so now what? Like, how can I find my purpose? How can I live these out in the healthiest way now that I'm
Yeah.
aware, now that I have a name for them?
Well, I think that the first thing that you just hit the nail right on the head right there. Now that you have a name for them,
Mm-hmm.
I think the first and most important step is to understand what you're looking for. Right? And honestly, I would say that one of the reasons I believe we see the chaos and in the world we do today, the depression, right? The
Mm-hmm.
anger, the
Mm-hmm.
confusion we see in the world today is because everybody is looking for peace and happiness.
Right.
But once again, they're ambiguous, right? And I guess what I'm telling you, we can define them. In order to
Mm-hmm.
be at peace, in order to find happiness, you have to have security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. And here's the challenge. So I would ask people to look into their lives and see those influences and find the one that either maybe they have a moment of self-revelation and they can say, I'm mismanaging this one. Or they can say, this is the one that has been violated, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
place where I'm hurting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when you have a name for it, when you can name it, of course, that is the very beginning of healing. And that's where the beautiful
Absolutely.
journey begins,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so right from the beginning, I would say the fact that you can now name them, I think is a powerful thing. And you can look at your spouse and you go, oh wow. Or whoever your friend or whatever it is, my sister, you
Mm-hmm.
know, there's this fracture in our relationship. Where is it? Well, now I don't have to look at the entire universe, right? And
Right.
again, and get into the deep depths of philosophy and psychology and neuroscience. Well, at the same time, very good things are there. I can boil it down to five things, and that's not too complicated, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
as an example, I can tell you this: when I first got married, um, in the early years, we had some really rocky times.
Mm-hmm.
And as I look back in my life, and I can say, what did I do that contributed to that rockiness? And I can say, I know, especially young Corey, stomped on my wife's desire for independence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
she wanted some sort of autonomy, and I can see how large part of our rockiness in our relationship was me not giving her that autonomy. And I know why. I can look back at me and say it was a security issue for
I
me.
was just gonna
I
say
grew
that.
up in a
Yeah, security.
I grew up in a volatile home, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I needed to control to feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I often say that you show me a control freak, and I'll show you someone who is desperately looking for security or
Yes.
significance,
Right.
right? And
Right.
they have an unhealthy way of trying to pursue it because they
Mm-hmm.
probably can't name it. They don't know what it is. They just know they're missing something, right? And they
Right.
compensate through control.
Yeah. Wow, that makes so much sense. So it's really about looking at yourself through that lens, looking at your relationships through that lens. And I think
Mhm.
that's a amazing way to set up relationships as you begin to get into new relationships, and an
Yeah.
amazing way to evaluate the relationships that you are in, both looking at your partner and
Mhm.
becoming aware of what are their main, like we all have, it's kind of like the love languages, right? Like we all feel
Right.
them, but then some of them hit us a little stronger. We have a greater need for some than
Yeah.
others, and kind of
Yeah.
understanding your partner and yourself and your need
Yeah.
for all of those five.
I think that's absolutely true, right? My book is often compared to the five love languages with the five cravings
Mm.
of the soul, and it
Hmm.
absolutely has that aspect because when you can bring it down to that, I don't want to call it simplistic, but it's a manageable. It's something that's
Framework.
manageable
Yeah.
to try to comprehend. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Framework. Thank you. And it opens up a world of possibility because you can now the world isn't as complicated as we like to pretend it is. Sometimes
Yeah.
it is much simpler when we're using the right language and applying it in the right way.
I love that. I love that. So, can you, first of all, this is just amazing wisdom. And I hope that everybody goes out and gets your book and really starts to dive into it and understand their soul cravings. Um, can you give one last word of encouragement, maybe to someone who feels like, I feel like maybe all of these are crushed. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm gonna, you know, work my way out of it or find ways to fulfill this, or I feel a little maybe soul lost. Can you give one last word of
Right.
encouragement to that person?
Right. Well, I guess my word of encouragement would start this way. I would say, don't believe the reflection in the mirror. That is not who you are. Who you are is a soul that I would tell you has been created by God for a great and beautiful purpose.
Mhm.
And he, if you will allow him, wants to meet each of those five needs. And I think that to start with, as people kind of seek that personal growth, now that you can name what they are, you have to start evaluating for yourself because I don't want to project onto anybody, how they're going to do this.
Sure.
But I would say, when you can look at yourself and you can say, I've been broken in my security. It's an important acknowledgement to make, right? Because then now I can say, okay, what does healthy security look like? And I can ask Dr. Zoe, or whatever it is they're looking for. Or I can say, I can acknowledge, oh my goodness, I can see how I'm just going to give my personal testimony here, how my deep desire for innocence, how I have mismanaged it to the point where I have become abusive to the people in my life, where they can't feel safe because if they word a sentence wrong, I'm going to fight or I'm going to flee, right? And I can say, oh, okay, what do I need to do to manage this craving in a healthier way? And so I would encourage people to realize that you have been beautifully created by God. He created you for a good purpose, and he gave you these 5 cravings for the good and beautiful purpose of drawing you back to him, in whom you will find true, hope and fulfillment.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. How can my audience find you, find your book?
Thank you so much. Well, it's available wherever books are sold. If you just type in The Magnetic Heart of God or Understanding the 5 Cravings of Your Soul, it'll pop up on any internet search. CoreyRosenke.com is also a place you could learn more about me. And I've put a few links into there, just kind of some main places where the book is available. But yeah, just kind of, I guess I would say an internet search or my website, CoreyRosenke.com would be the best ways. And I am so excited. I have seen so much transformation in people's lives when it's like the light comes on and for the first time they see themselves fully.
Yeah.
And when you can, and that just gives such an opportunity to not only pursue healing from trauma, but to pursue abundant life. Right? It begins by understanding who you are. And I really hope that this book will help people with that.
I'm sure that it will. I feel your passion. I hear it. And I love the premise. It sits so well with me. And I know that it's going to help heal other people. So thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Stronger in the Difficult Places. Please hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and share and review to help others find me too. If you haven't already, go to drzoeshaw.com to sign up for my newsletters to get freebies, quizzes, and encouragement that will help you strengthen your relationships. Connect with me throughout the week on Instagram. I love hearing from you all. Until next time, have a strong week.